Okay, we're on lesson 3, absolute values and inequalities. Absolute value literally means the distance to 0. The distance to 0. I'm going to use these nice tall bars as how we write that. So the absolute value being 3, that means our distance is 3 or -3. Every absolute value has 2 answers. So when we have like this, we got to sandwich it in between our 2 answers. Our 2 answers are going to be positive and -7. So we got -7 equals x minus 5 equals 7. I'm going to sandwich it in between these 2. And then I add 5 to each side, just like I did in lesson 2. So I get x equals 12 and x equals -2. I get 2 answers with absolute values. Here's my tricky one. An absolute value can never be negative. That negative distance doesn't work. It's a trick. Absolute value can never be negative. That's how I'm going to trick you. But say you have this thing. First I got to get the absolute value by itself, so I'm going to add 10. Now it's not negative anymore. So now I can actually solve this thing. Sandwich it in between 6 and -6, and then do my magic. Subtract 7, -13 equals 3x equals -1, and divide by 3, and I get x equals -13 over 3 and -1 over 3. So 2 answers, always with absolute values. The difference between these. Okay, so when its absolute value is less than 4, that means I'm sandwiching it in between. So it's like 4, -4, and 4. When it's greater than, like this, if we sandwich it in between, we got x greater than 4 and less than -4, that kind of thing. We get quite confused. Oops, I did this wrong. This way. It doesn't look pretty because it's confusing. So instead, we write it as 2 different things. So it's x greater than 4 and x less than -4. Because we don't like this. We can't rate it that way. Solve and graph. So we're going to solve it first. So I have to sandwich between -4 and 4. First thing we got to do is add the 5. So we have 1 and 9 now. And then divide by a negative. And when I divide by a negative, those signs are going to change. Those signs change. So over here I have -1/2 and -9/2. If you're going to graph this, solve and graph. So it's sandwiched. Oh, here we got that ugly thing. So it's going to be 1/2 x plus 3 greater than or equal to 7. And 1/2 x plus 3 less than or equal to -7. That's where you split those 2 up. So first one, solve it pretty easily. Second one, 1/2 x less than or equal to -10, x less than or equal to -5. So it's greater than 8 and less than -5. Those are my 2 answers. Word problems with inequalities, your general setup. So you got your absolute value and you x minus my average and less than or equal to my tolerance. Now another word for average is my ideal. So that could also be used, but that's my general setup. So the average U.S. woman is 64 inches tall with a tolerance of 5 inches. Write an absolute value inequality representing the range of heights. So I got my formula, x minus my average, they said was 64, less than or equal to my tolerance, which was 5. And then this isn't my actual inequality. That's my setup. So now to solve this thing, I sandwich it in between -5 and 5. And then we add 64 and we get 59 and 69. So this means that women, most women, are between 59 inches and 69 inches tall.